This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. We have heard the sobering projections about the new hurricane season, and that raises the question, just how well protected are we if the projections are accurate? We will look tonight at the walls around us, particularly the barriers and levees, floodgates, pumping stations, and how they compare to those of the past. We'll also look at the legislature as the doors close on the session, and at Trader Joe's, which will be opening several new doors in the area. Among many issues the lawmakers faced was monitoring air pollution. We'll look at the disagreement, and for something unusual, we'll try to answer the question, where have all the pigeons gone? Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Mike Smith, staff writer of the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Rich Collins, Associate News Editor, Biz New Orleans. Going to go on over to Mike because here it is, June 1, the official start of the hurricane season. How protected are we?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we're protected a lot more than we were in 2005. We can say that clearly. But yeah, there's a very frightening forecast ahead of us. The worst forecast that NOAA has ever issued in May. So a lot of attention is going to be on our new levees. So the levees are way better than 2005. They're designed to withstand a 100-year storm surge. Mm-hmm. All the experts say way better than before. They have a lot of confidence in the levees, but they will be overtopped someday, and we have to be prepared for that. The difference is they're designed not to collapse if they're overtopped. They're designed to be able to kind of withstand the pressure that'll be put on them and not crumble the way the Katrina levees did. That allows us to pump the water out instead of the levees crumbling and the city flooding. So there should be some flooding, but we can maybe deal with it, hopefully.
Flood walls, I mean, that's what really did us in, really, for Hurricane Katrina. And also just sort of generally, after Katrina, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came in with a $14.6 billion hurricane risk reduction system. And in that was taking care of those flood walls and building the surge barrier and the world's biggest pumping station. What was the name of that one again?
The West Closure Complex, yeah.
So let's sort of to take a look at that. In terms of the flood walls, are they better?
They are better, yeah. I mean, this is the biggest project of its kind that the Corps has ever done. It could be surpassed by New York or Houston if they ever go ahead with those projects. But yeah, they're much better. There have been issues with it that need to be corrected. For example, the pumps at the 3 main outfall canals in New Orleans have already started to corrode only about 3 years after they were handed over.
And they're supposed to have a 35-year lifespan, as
35-year
So after
lifespan.
3 years, they started corroding. So what is being done to fix that problem?
So the long-term fix is ongoing, and there's been negotiations with the contractor and the Corps, with the state as a third party, trying to sort that out. There is enough capacity, according to the Corps, there is enough capacity in place for storm season. They're saying you shouldn't have to worry about that. They've done temporary repairs on the pumps. Just a question of getting them to that 35-year lifespan.
So what do those pumps do for us?
They're really vital to the new system. Basically, when storm surge comes in, which, as a lot of people remember, was a big problem in Katrina, which broke through 17th Street Canal, for example. We can now close off those canals. But since they're closed, rainfall and drainage is still getting into the canals. So you have to pump it out into the lake. So that's what these pumps are for. So they're really important to the
Pumps
system.
are very, very important. E, did you have something?
Well, actually, I was going to ask about the 17th Street Canal because the first major break was at 34th Street along 17th Street Canal. But since then, they built that big Hoover Dam type structure there, and so it was pretty much did away with Bucktown on the other side. But how effective is that? I mean, what does that structure do?
The whole closure, you mean,
Yeah.
to the canal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's to block the storm surge, basically, but then you have to pump out the rainwater, you know. We also have the bigger surge barrier, which some people call the Great Wall of Louisiana, which is out by the Industrial Canal and the
in Lake
Intercoastal.
Bourne, yeah.
In Lake Bourne. And also by Mr. Go,
Mr.
as
Go,
we all
which has been
remember.
closed off.
What
which
is
has
that
been
made out of?
closed.
The Great Wall? Was that?
It's a huge concrete structure. I believe it's about 28 feet on average above sea level,
Okay.
and that is to. It also blocks storm surge. It's designed to be overtopped in a way. It's much better than what we had before. There's a sort of place where, if it does get overtopped, where the water is supposed to be stored. But that's another key element of the whole
That's,
system.
I think, a 2-mile wall.
It's
too,
about, yeah,
you
it's
know,
almost
just
2
covers
miles, about
the span. It's
1.8.
pretty amazing. Excuse me, amazing to see.
It is, yeah.
We're covered in terms of the levees, as you said, for the 100-year storm. But we're not always going to get a 100-year storm. And so, you know, that's what people are really concerned about. We do seem to be more protected, but are we, you know?
Yeah, I mean, especially as storms intensify with climate change. There's already discussions about whether to raise the levees to 200-year level. That discussion is ongoing. It's obviously a lot of money, and so we'd have to get that approved through Congress. The other question is, we're sinking, and the levees are also sinking.
Right.
So we have to maintain those, and that's also a lot of money, and the state has to continually fund that. So those are two big questions that we're going to have to confront. I think everybody would like higher protection in this age of, you know, intensifying hurricanes. It's a question of practical, you know, funding and that sort of thing. But as we discussed before, at least if they do get overtopped, they're not supposed to collapse in the way they did in the past.
Is the power?
Power. We were going to ask the same
Go ahead.
question, I think. What about the power to those pumps? Is that sufficient? That's been a problem before. If we lose power and then the pumps can't
Well,
do
it's not with
anything.
the Sewage and Water Board system.
Yeah,
those pumps
this
are not
is not
part of the Sewage and Water
yeah,
Board.
they have their own
But
power
they have their own
supply.
power and
Yeah,
it's
yeah, they do.
sufficient?
Yeah. It's they're that's supposedly all designed with that in mind. Yeah.
So really a big concern, that's for sure. And then now the authorities are saying because these storms can really intensify so quickly, we can't depend on contraflow. So just be prepared, even though we are a bit protected, that this whole system really was not put to the test in terms of surge with Hurricane Ida.
Yeah, Hurricane Ida kind of glanced at us in a way. I mean, it was a sort of test, but not a true test. A little bit further over and we could have gotten a really big test, So yeah, it remains to be seen. A kind of real test hasn't happened yet. I mean, the signs in Hurricane Ida were good. It did, even though it wasn't a direct hit, the experts say it did hold up well, and that was a good sign. But yeah, we'll have to see in a bigger storm what happens.
But back to the power, to the folks at home. Is there anything better about the whole power grid and the reliability of it and the ability to fix it? Or?
That's a good question. A little outside my expertise, but yeah, I think at Entergy, I do know. I interviewed Colin Arnold with the city, who's the emergency preparedness director for the city, a couple weeks ago, and he said that is probably one of his major concerns, which is power. As you all probably remember, during Ida, most of the deaths were related to power outages. So kind of getting things like cooling centers up and running is very important for the city. I think Entergy is still warning, for example, if we have a strong storm, to be ready for 3 weeks without power, at least, for example, 2 weeks for a smaller storm. So I think that concern is definitely still there. I mean, I don't think we've gotten to a point yet where, I don't know where the whole, there's a resiliency plan I think that they're pursuing, but I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, well, here we are. And just, the past 2 years have been good to us, and we kind of hope our luck holds, but this is going to be a dicey season. So.
Yeah, knock on wood, yeah.
Thanks a lot. All right, is it or is it not? Are they coming or are they not? They won't say for sure. Trader Joe's is what we're talking about.
Okay, so the specialty retailer story is that, last year there was stories in all the media about a specialty retailer coming to Tulane Avenue near Dorgenwall, Roche-Blave, that area right above the new medical development. The city council approved plans for that. It's been pretty quiet since last fall, but near as anyone can tell, a specialty retailer that matches all the specifications of that specialty retailer is planning, will be there on that site. That's owned by the File organization, which is Lakeside Mall and a bunch of other commercial real estate in town. Now, the new news is that in the neighborhood over there by Ferret Street, there's been talk over the last few months because of some neighborhood meetings about another specialty retailer development that also matches those same specifications coming to that site of the Our Lady of Lourdes School at the corner of Ferret and Napoleon. Mm-hmm. And this week, City Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit for Our Lady of Lourdes, which still owns the property, to have a grocery store larger than 10,000 square feet and to be able to sell liquor. But that approval was given on the condition that the Historic District Landmarks Commission permits the existing school building to be demolished. That conversation happens next week on June 5th, or at least will start happening.
For the sake of the audience, can we say we're probably talking about Trader Joe's?
Right, yeah. So the buzz is Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is really hush-hush about all these kinds of things, but people have been hoping for and waiting for a Trader Joe's to come into Orleans Parish for years. The one that came to Veterans in 2016 is always crowded, always busy. Right. And so, the Trader Joe's is a very specific type of animal. It's not like a normal grocery store with 40,000 items. They have about 4,000 items, mostly store brand. It's got a cult-like following. They're smaller than a normal grocery store, and they don't sell everything. So Trader Joe's likes to be near another grocery store where you can go buy shampoo or light bulbs or batteries. They like to be near like a Walgreens or a Rouse's even. So in a lot of ways, this makes a lot of sense. I've talked to a bunch of people in the neighborhood this week. I've also been trying to talk to the people really involved in the project. Everyone's being really tight-lipped. But there are some people that are concerned about demolishing the building. It's a 1957 brick.
So we're not talking about the church?
Not the church. The church is a separate development, some developer overlap. The church is being converted into like a reception space. And apparently there's about to be an announcement related to that about another partner that's got some name recognition. But there is a little bit of concern about the destruction of the building, but overall, the people that I talked to in the neighborhood, including someone who lives on Jenna Street where this thing would be built, and his feeling was, just please get something built because this has been empty now for years. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a decent amount of enthusiasm for the idea.
Well, if all this comes to pass, that's going to be quite a presence. I mean, they already have, what's in Metairie, the Mid-City facility. I mean, the plan looks like huge. It's a big space, and now one uptown. And those are two fairly close together. So they're going to be like a major grocer in New Orleans coming from nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, so Trader Joe's, it's interesting. It started in 1967 in California and grew slowly. There's not as many Trader Joe's as some of these other big brands, but it's approaching 600. And we went from none in New Orleans, greater New Orleans, until about, 8 years ago. And now we might have 3. It's notable that there's not many Trader Joe's in the South yet. I think there's one in Alabama. There's one more in Baton Rouge. There's none in Mississippi. So it's still uncharted territory for them in the Deep South. But we'll just have to see. Again, the developers absolutely not saying that that's what this is. But even at the City Planning Commission meeting this week, the questions and answers that were happening, and even the submitted documents, the specifications are very, very much overlap with what you would expect.
When would the official word come out then in this process?
Basically, as I understand, Historic District Landmarks Commission meets on June 5th. If they can say
yay or nay
on a demolition, if they say yay, then it would start moving toward what the mayor's approval and all that kind of thing. If they say nay, the city council and the city council person who's in charge of that district, Leslie Harris, could overrule HDLC. I talked to somebody, well, I shouldn't say. Anyway,
So the status of the one in Tulane?
Approved, all quiet and file organization, which I reached out to this week, is not talking.
Still no confirmation on whether or not it is a TJ's.
No, nothing.
Okay.
It's very tight-lipped.
Okay, doke. All righty. Thanks a lot, Rich.
Yeah.
Okay, E, over to you. Legislative session is drawing to a close.
Yeah, this time of year reminds me of our old friend, the late John McGinnis, who at the weekend of the closing of the legislative session had this great line, and the line was, "The legislative could have done less, but they ran out of time." It was a funny line, but it wouldn't have applied to this legislature because they did a lot. And I think one reason is because you had a new governor who's as ambitious as possibly can be and was trying to get as much power. Louisiana's always had a tradition of powerful governors. We have a guy who wants to be a super powerful governor, and a lot of the legislation involved increasing his powers. Legislation in which he pretty much appoints the chairman of pretty much all the boards. A few he doesn't, but most of them. So he's got a lot of appointive power, fills a lot of positions, and he has the legislature in his advantage. He has a Republican House and Senate. So this is his first year, okay? So imagine where you go from here. And as the session ends Monday, this legislature, this governor will have already been through 2 sessions. First of all, they had that crime session, and now this. And so things are underway. Some things didn't quite happen. The call for the Constitutional Convention didn't happen. I'm not quite sure where it's going to wind up, but it's going to probably be something that's going to be a piecemeal sort of thing. There's a lot of conversation about public information laws and people trying to limit that or to regulate it. Some compromise kind of versions, but no overall thing. And in the last days, there was something where the governor's office wanted to stick in something, applying that to his office as far as vacation schedules and personal plans. And we still don't know quite where that's going to land. Governor John Bell Edwards, who's been quiet during this whole thing, came out and opposed that. He says, the governor doesn't have any right to be able to keep his plans quiet. And so that was out there. Besides that, there were a few setbacks, and so I think they can look back at the body of work that there was a lot that was done. Now, yesterday, I want to ask Mike that you had a piece about legislation about energy production and how the money would be dedicated.
Yeah, and this sort of ties into our concerns about coastal restoration, and we're going to soon have a lot less money to do that because of the BP fines and settlements related to the spill. It runs out by 2032, and we're already starting next year. We're going to see there's going to be a decline. So we're looking for ways to fill that gap. One of the ways is wind power in the Gulf, for example, using taxes and revenue from that and dedicating it to coastal restoration and protection. So this bill passed yesterday, does that. Part of it requires a constitutional amendment, so that means it has to go to the voters in November. There's also federal legislation that would do a similar thing. This would serve as a backup for federal waters, but the bill is there's a companion bill that also relates to state waters. Revenue in state waters from these projects would also be dedicated to coastal projects. So we'll see if the governor signs that. It approved. It had been proposed in the previous 2 years, and it actually passed this year. So we'll have to see if it makes it all the way through.
So this would be revenue generated by wind farms.
Yeah, essentially.
What status? What's the status right now of wind farms in the Gulf?
So we've got one project in federal waters on the way. I think a lot of people are going to be looking to see how that works. It's a little more complicated to do wind in the Gulf compared to, say, off the East Coast. The winds are less. Hurricane threats, the bottoms are softer, so a lot of people are going to be looking at that to see how it goes.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Okay, Don, over to you. Where are the pigeons?
Well, it's anyone's guess. I talked with a guy named Trapper John, who's a wildlife mitigation specialist. This idea actually came from my husband and then several other people. Where are the pigeons? I've been here since 1998. I don't recall seeing a whole lot of pigeons, but in talking with both you and Errol, you remember them in City Park, you remember them in the French Quarter. There's a published report from 2015 that says that the French Market Corporation actually spent some time poisoning the pigeons because they were overpopulated. No one in the city would talk to me today about the pigeon population. Trapper John has all sorts of theories on what has happened to the pigeons, and I'll share some of them with you. Pigeons are not the brightest of birds. In fact, not bright at all. They depend on humans, really, for their survival and their food. They nest in places like bridges and grain elevators and places they need a flat surface and a stable surface. They apparently used to nest in the Huey P. Long Bridge, which was built almost as if it were coops that had open holes. So when that bridge was rebuilt, those coop-like structures went away. Trapper John was involved in the early 2000s in a program at the airport, actually 2000 teens, because the pigeons would fly right across the runway to get to a grain elevator in Ama across the river. They were getting sucked up by airplane engines. The FAA actually said, you got to get these pigeons out of here or we can't fly planes. So he says in the course of about 5 years, they got rid of about 4,000 or more pigeons. So the population would naturally decline there. If they were being poisoned in the French Quarter, the population's declining there. He says there's also a rumor that there was a feed somewhere in the city that sterilized the male birds. But nobody will admit to ever doing that because it would be illegal against the Migratory Bird Act, not because pigeons are protected, but other animals that might eat that feed would have been protected. Another couple of theories. We're seeing a whole lot of crows where we didn't used to see crows. We were talking about them before recording, and these big black North American crows are smarter than pigeons and also will eat young pigeons and steal from their nests and steal their food sources. So they may have taken over and wiped the pigeons out. We also had been a nesting place and a migratory place for the black-bellied whistling ducks. They're all over. They used to be all over Audubon Park. About a month and a half ago, they've left to go wherever they go this time of year. They're the ducks that have orange bills and orange legs and a nice black belly, and they make a whistling sound. They also, smarter than the average pigeon, get their food source and kind of take over in the lower areas and force the pigeons to go higher to find food, and then the pigeons die off. So it's a whole lot of rumor about where the pigeons have gone. Nobody knows for sure. There's actually a pigeon house at City Park. If you're familiar with it, it's a dome structure with lots of holes in it where people used to feed the pigeons. It's empty. And we're building better bridges. We're not building the bridges like the old Huey P. Long Bridge with holes in it that are coops for pigeons to nest in. Because when the pigeons nest or other birds nest on the bridges and then they do their business all over the bridge, that's a really corrosive substance. And it hurts the bridges. So, and river traffic has gotten better. That's another theory, that the barges aren't spilling as much grain as they once were. It used to be a messier operation along the river. I mean, all this sounds so crazy, but where have the pigeons gone? Their food sources are gone. The bridges are better. The operation on the river is cleaner and neater, so there's less spillage, so there's less food for the pigeons who are lazy and not very smart.
Hard times for a pigeon out there right now.
It does sound like very hard times. And then there's also crows, too.
I think the crows are an important
I can't
factor.
stand the crows, but so I did ask, what are our problem animals now? Just if anybody's curious, if we're not dealing with pigeons, our biggest problem animals in the Orleans Parish area right now are the wild coyotes and wild boar.
What?
So,
Yeah,
stay tuned.
well, then certainly the coyotes. I mean, people are spotting coyotes in neighborhoods. And,
I didn't know about the boar.
well, sort of in wooded areas, but yeah.
That's
a
wild.
little boar there. All right, Don, thanks a lot. Interesting. Okay, Mike, we're closing up with you because also there's legislation regarding pollution monitors.
Yeah, that's right. This has become an issue because there have always been community monitors to some degree, but the EPA, the federal government, is taken a big interest in this and funding community groups that want to set up their own monitors that say Louisiana's 40 or so official monitors just aren't sufficient to monitor pollution. So the legislation. So this is the stretch of the industrial corridor around the Mississippi River we're talking about. It's mostly what we're talking about, yeah. Industry is a bit concerned with this, so pushed for legislation that was approved that sets some guidelines for community monitors and when that data can be used to determine if there's been a violation of pollution rules and fines as a result. So those rules are basically what EPA monitors follow. But the EPA itself wrote a letter with some concerns about this legislation saying, yes, we have our own standards, but there can be other monitors that are sufficient to show that pollution is happening that aren't necessarily exactly the same as what we use.
So the issue is the findings of the community groups. That data won't necessarily, according to this legislation, be included in determining whether or not there are violations?
Unless they meet the standards, yeah. And so that's, I'm not sure yet, some of the new monitors being put in place with these grants, I'm not sure if those are going to meet the standards or not. I guess we'll have to, it's probably some very technical specifications that need to be figured out. But there is one, for example, one big project going on, a group called Lean, which a lot of people may have heard of. It's gotten a $500,000 grant to run cars that monitor pollution basically on a 300-mile route up and down the Mississippi River corridor. And they're going to be collecting that data and posting it. And they're saying it's turning up some interesting findings so far. It's not clear yet what exactly, but they're saying it's another reason why they're saying this is important to have, because it's filling a gap.
And has this legislation been signed by the governor? I mean, is this now law?
I don't believe it's been signed yet. It's all signals that he will sign it, I think. But yeah, it's been approved by both houses.
All righty, Mike. Thanks a lot. Time for other stories. E.
Foot traffic downtown, as measured by the Downtown Development District during spring at the time of the Jazz Fest, has been incredible. They came out with a report that between April 25th, first day of the Jazz Fest, and May 5th, the last day, 1.1 million unique visitors were downtown.
Okay.
They also included the two-lane graduation, which also brought a lot of people in town too. So,
Mike, over to you.
Yeah, I think we should keep an eye on. Talking about hurricane season and the new levee system, with that was a new levee board that sought to get politics out of the management of flood protection. They tried to appoint a new member recently who is eminently qualified by all accounts, an engineer at UNO, and for reasons that aren't yet clear, the governor has rejected that nomination. And that's raised some concerns that this could be politicized again.
Okay, all right, Mike, thanks. Don?
It is that time of year when we have the pop-up thunderstorms and lots of rainstorms, and just a reminder from the pest control experts to dump the buckets and dump standing water on your property so that we don't end up with mosquitoes bothering all of us.
Okay, good reminder. Thanks. All right, Rich, over to you.
Just from the business world, I'll go with Port Nola and the container terminal in St. Bernard Parish. They're getting near the end of that 36-month permit process, so some decisions and some more news about that's coming up in a few months. And then, of course, Port Nola's president and CEO, Brandy Christian, is leaving this month for a new job in the private industry. So just going to be interesting to see how that goes, because as that goes the future of shipping and transportation in this city.
A big issue. All right, guys, thanks a lot for being here, and thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.